Hey everyone, welcome to Architects of Imagination, where we talk to the brilliant minds behind your favorite video games. And today I am very pleased to announce my buddy and the first guest who lives here in town in Savannah, Georgia with me. This is Mr. Jack Mamias. Welcome, Jack.
Hi, what's up, David?
Good to have you, dude. Um,
Thanks.
so Jack is his it's professor here at SCAD teaching game design. He's had a pretty legendary career up to this point. He was on Mechwarrior 2, Crysis, Far Cry, Heavy Gear 2, and a bunch of other stuff. Jack was one of the very early on people at Activision, having worked with Bobby Kotick, I believe. Is that right?
Bobby Kotick, yeah,
All right.
his office was right near mine actually back in the day.
Very cool. And tell us what you're up to now. You're teaching SCAD at their game design program.
Yeah, I moved all around the world with my career, but I'm originally was from Savannah, and everywhere I went, I missed Savannah, and I'd come back for breaks and stuff, and um, I would really just want to stay here. So eventually, after I kind of finished up what I was doing with AAA, I decided to start a studio here. And I've done that and I've been working on that. And while I was doing that, I got recruited by Brenda Brathwaite to teach at SCAD as a professor of game design. And I had never taught anything and I didn't know anything about it, but I've always loved SCAD from the beginning. It really transformed Savannah from what it was, which was a unknown town essentially, to now it's a huge destination for tourists because of how well it's put together, and SCAD had a lot to do with that. Um, so I was honored when they asked me to work there, and I kind of had to teach myself to be a professor. I knew all about game design and production, and it turns out they really needed somebody that was in that position that could teach capstone projects, which is essentially just like little, either you're prototyping a game or you're putting out a game in essentially 6 months. And I've worked on over 200 projects with students now, and I
Oh man.
love it. It's really, in a way, it's more fulfilling than game development, and I still love game development. I still do it. In my other 50 hours a week that I work. But the SCAD part was just turned out to be a great surprise for how enjoyable it is, and how it gives you a good feeling inside when you're helping somebody enter the game industry.
Yeah, and just very conveniently here in your hometown. that's
Yeah.
that's pretty rad. Let me if I may be getting names mixed up, but Brenda Braithwaite, it's now Brenda Romero,
Yeah,
right?
she was when she was here, she was the chair of game design, and she would always bring John Romero in to like look at the student projects and give feedback on them. And then she moved out to Santa Cruz and she married him. So and she became Brenda Romero, and they both have moved to Galway, Ireland, and they're working at John Romero Games, I believe, working on some like Empire of Sin and a few other cool games that they're working on.
Yeah, and I got the pleasure of working with John and Brendan and company. We did some of the effects for Empire Sin.
Great. Yeah, it's
And
cool.
SCAD has played a pivotal role in the formation of our company too. Undertone Effects has its first 4 out of 5 hires or so were SCAD students. So that's been great.
We do a good job. We do. We put them ready to go. We put them out ready to
Yeah,
go, which is great.
that's awesome. And talk a little bit about your other side project. It's not released yet. I had the pleasure to play in the beta a little while ago. You're working on a game as well with your own studio. Tell us about that.
Yeah, ever since I was at Activision back in the day working on MechWarrior 2, that was a sim game, and sim games were huge in the 90s when I was there. They were like the top selling games out there, like Wing Commander and X-Wing, and MechWarrior 2 was also a pretty big seller. And I love working on the Sims and the sim type games, and I always wanted to do a space sim because big fan of Star Trek, big fan of Star Wars, and all the sci-fi stuff out there. And finally, just said, well, look, no one wants to do them anymore, so I'm just going to do it myself. So we kickstarted, myself and my partner, kickstarted the game. Uh, and didn't hit it the first time, so we did it again, and we finally got the amount we asked for. And we've been working on it literally for about 10 years, and it's
Oh
coming
man.
out in hopefully next 2 or 3 weeks. So in early access on
Oh
Steam.
shit!
So yeah,
Killer. That's great.
finally
Wonderful
ready.
timing.
Yeah, finally
Um,
ready.
I had a blast to play.
Yeah.
It's hardcore. It's a little like it takes some moment to get into the controls, but
It has a
like
learning curve certainly because it's real science. We the constraint was real science with it, and one of the other designers, producers on it, David Westman, worked on the original X-wing, and he really pushed the hard science because he had worked on X-wing was arcadey space sim, right? It's like doesn't it
yeah,
flies like an airplane and doesn't really make sense in how it would fly. So we really looked into it. We said, what if we just turn the physics engine on and see how actually things would work? And we had to build the ships in a certain way. They have to be symmetrical or they'll roll when they fly. So we learned all this stuff about how science works and how weapons worked, and we actually had to do research into modern day weapons to understand what a railgun would actually do, and what lasers
in zero
actually do,
G.
or yeah, that zero G. And we couldn't put all the trappings of hand wavium, Dave Westman likes to call it, which is like artificial gravity, force fields, stealth in space, the way ships are built. All of that we couldn't do. So we had to figure out a way to make it work and to make it, fun with real weapons. And it turns out it's great, but yeah, there is a learning curve. You got to fly it for a little while, you got to fly it for an hour or so, and then you can pretty much get it. But it's definitely is different than everything else out there. When we were making it, The Expanse came out while we were making it, and
Oh,
we
cool.
looked at their battles and we were like, "Wow, it's our battles. It looks just like our battles." So I mean, we're essentially, very clear, very close to the way The Expanse, the movie, the show works.
Awesome. And like, one thing I think about too when you're going for sort of real science in it is what like thrust and rotation means. Like in general, like a fighter has one thruster at
Yeah,
the back and all the other things are attitude changes, right? So like
yeah.
your thrust, you go forward and you just coast. There isn't like if you look at Star Wars movies, there's no like, fucking banking around and stuff like
You
that.
don't bank. It'd be impossible
if,
to bank, actually.
if you want to go if you want to make a right 90-degree turn, you basically have to like you're going, you need to reorient yourself so you're
Yep,
facing in the way, and you need to reverse thrust to stop yourself, and
yep.
then turn up and go after you stop. Or you can kind of like there's kind of like, but your orientation while you're maneuvering is important. And so like what you can see and aim at, that has big implications for.
It does. It does. And it has all the weapons are affected too because you have to really different weapons you have to lead in different ways. Like a, laser requires no leading. It just goes right to target basically, but all it does is heat up something and, eventually it'll malfunction if it gets hot enough. Where rail guns are super fast and you can almost point exactly to where it is and it'll hit it. But a chemical weapon like a Gatling cannon or an autocannon, you're gonna have to really lead them. So far, it doesn't even look like you're shooting at them in a way. But it's cool. Somebody's chasing you. You can turn around and be shooting at them while you're going backwards and stuff like that. As long as you don't run into a moon or something, you're good to go, or a station. It has a
Yeah.
unique gameplay. It's fun, and we even have missions that are inside like dugout mines. So it's almost like the old Descent game. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh hell yeah,
We
that
have
was
our
one of the
version of
first.
Descent.
Very cool. I forget if you added this in, and I'm kind of picturing now, like with a ballistic weapon. Like, are you including some of the like backwards force that it's going to induce on you, like
There
sort of
is a little bit of that. They'll push you
recoil?
back, but your ship compensates when it fires. I mean, the ship does have, like you said, RCS thrusters all over it. Some ships actually have thrusters forward and backwards, so they can slow down and move a lot faster. But the ship will compensate unless that system's been knocked out, and then you'll get a little recoil when you fire, depending on the weapon. So, like railguns really don't recoil a lot because it's just magnetically. Uh, it's like a maglev essentially, where it's just magnets and a flechette that's going down there, so it doesn't have a lot of recoil. But things like chemical weapons and missiles will definitely give a little pushback when you fire.
Yeah, awesome. And I think about too, like like X-wing fighters in Star Wars, right? With most of the ships in Star Wars have a thruster at the back, kind of derived from like what jets are to us now. But I
Absolutely.
kind of imagine like Well, really, when when people get to making fighters in space, it probably won't be that at all. I mean, it makes total sense to have. If you need maneuverability, you're gonna put like proper thrust in all directions. I think of like the last Starfighter and how it was kind of like that was a long time ago, but it
Yeah,
was more of an like an orbital like
yeah,
type ship.
yeah. Definitely. What was that? The Death Blossom that it, that it fired or whatever. Yeah, and the Star Furies in Babylon 5, they actually had they were built to be realistic essentially too. They had thrusters all over them and they kind of flew in a correct way.
Awesome. Yeah. Let's take a step back
Sure.
in time to the beginning of your career. Was Activision your first job?
Not my first career job. I mean, I had a bunch of like bad pizza delivery type jobs and
Yeah, I
things
mean
like
like in
that.
video games.
I graduated from University of Georgia in '82. I my degree I my dream job was to be an Imagineer for Disney, and I had no
Oh,
idea how
cool.
to do that. I read Bob Thomas's biography of Walt Disney, and I just fell in love with the guy. And I said, God, I want to do what he did, right? And just kind of make all your dreams come true. And I went to University of Georgia, and the closest they had was like creative director sort of position, and that was in the journalism and advertising and marketing department. So I got a degree in journalism from UGA, and when I got out, it's almost impossible to find a job. Even back then, it was super hard. I worked as a videographer essentially. So I was a production manager for a small video company, and we shot really lots of really bad commercials. But
Yeah.
this is where I first met got involved with SCAD because I would hire a lot of SCAD students just like you did at Undertone because they had a good film department and video department. So I'd bring them over, and this is back in 91. They were like, hey, you need to get this Amiga 2500 that's got Lightwave on it, and we can do uh, computer animation. I was like, what? You can do computer animation like for cheap? They're like, yeah, we can do it for essentially for free. So we went and got a 2500, had Lightwave, and we were doing CG, pretty decent CG because these students were so great. And eventually they were shooting the commercials and everything. And by the time I left, like around 94, I knew I wanted to take a step up, and I knew in Savannah, in video, video, you really, maybe you can work on the local news or something. That's as good as you're going to do here, right?
Yeah,
It's not
WSAV.
really, yeah, it's not really a town. So I said, well, I need to move to either Hollywood or New York, or Hollywood or New York to to move up. So me and my brother moved to LA, just packed the van up and moved to LA, and I wanted to go work in film. So I did a few PA gigs and camera person gigs in LA. It was interesting. It's a hard business though, show business. I mean, it's tough.
Yeah.
But I was bartending at night at a place called La Poubelle in Hollywood, and met a designer on MechWarrior 2 from Activision. And I had heard of MechWarrior 2, and it was like, oh my god, because I'd played BattleTech as a tabletop game.
Yeah.
BattleTech's a little miniature game like Warhammer. And he said, yeah, give me your resume. And I had a really crappy resume. I look at it now; it's embarrassing, right, when I look at it. But I
Yeah.
gave it to him,
Hey, you
and
start got to start somewhere.
oh god. And then 3 months later, I get a call from Josh Resnick, and he was the producer of MechWarrior 2. He said, "Come in for an interview." So I interviewed Howard Marks, who was the head of Activision. Um, Alan Gershenfeld was there. Bobby was there, and they brought me on as a producer. They said, "Oh, you're a producer. Well, you'll be a producer here too." So I literally just made a lateral move to one of the top spots on the team, which was crazy because I couldn't program or
Hell,
anything. But I
hell yeah.
could do production. I was good at production, so I was good at working, good at working teams. And I didn't know that I was good at design, but I was because I'd been a dungeon master for, for the last 10 years. I'd been doing, Dungeons and Dragons and doing dungeons. So I was looking at the work the designers were doing. I said, "Oh, that's a job that people do. They write stuff down and they design documents." So I started helping in that and learning that while I was on MechWarrior 2. But the job they assigned me on Mech 2 was senior lead tester on the game. So all of a sudden I walk in and there's 20 testers saying, "Okay, what do we do, boss?" Right? And we got to test Mechwarrior 2, which was super hard to test because back in the day, back in the 90s like that, you'd have a PC, but then you'd have 10 different sound cards, right? And it'd have to work on all the sound cards, and you'd have 10
Yeah.
different. There were no video cards, but every machine was completely different. It was all, I think, yeah, MechWarrior 2 was one of the first to have a CD. So, we were testing to see how the CD would work. And we had to work on all the joysticks too, because it's an Activision game. There must have been 100 different types of joysticks back in the day, because
None
Flight
of
Sims
which
was
had
big.
drivers.
None of them had drivers. None of them worked. So, we would, and I learned what crunch time was because we definitely would sleep under our desk and we would stay there for 2 or 3 days straight and, not even be able to go home, take a shower and stuff. It was so rough, but we got it out on time. It was a
Man,
huge, MechWarrior 2 was a huge hit. The team was great. I mean, this team, John Spinelli was the director, Josh was the producer, Sean Vesey, Zach Norman. These guys were so awesome to me. They're still like heroes of mine, basically. When I was watching them work and stuff like that, they all went on to do, like Josh went and started Pandemic, and then they did some great games at Pandemic,
yeah.
Battlefront and Mercenaries and all those games.
Saboteur.
And yeah, so he did that, and he did great, sold it for hundreds of millions of dollars, and he
I,
started a candy factory. Now I see the rest of them like Sean Vesey's head of Crystal Dynamics or something. So these guys are all like they've gone on to do amazing things. So it's a real pleasure to work with them.
I
But it was great.
remember. I remember going to the pandemic like blowout party right before the company like went under. It got sold. I don't know. There was some
Is that when where they were on where
scandal.
the top floor of the building in Wilshire, or they were in
No,
Venice?
so it was the Natural History Museum in L.A. They had booked out. They had Jason Bentley, who was like my favorite DJ at the time, was spinning. And like there was just, well, I don't know, thousands of people. It was a pretty big party. I think they had just gotten bought out or I don't know. They shut down right after or
They did.
some
They
something
got
weird.
bought by EA. EA does what EA does. They'll get the licenses and they'll keep the people they want. Because there's always like 5 people they want, right, or 10 people, and the rest of the people, they get usually tossed or whatever. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I don't know what happened. I know some of the people work there. They all like Josh though. I think Josh did a great job, and he took care of people. So he's a great guy.
So back in MechWarrior 2 day, like if you look at the structure of Activision Blizzard these days, it
Yeah.
is a massive company. When I was there, so I was there
Yeah.
from 2008 to 2018,
The
roughly.
money days. Call of Duty days.
We jokingly say thank you, Uncle Bobby,
Hmm.
from time to time.
Hmm.
For yeah, I don't know. So these days, sort of the structure is, there's sort of like Activision and Blizzard are when I was there anyway. I don't know if things have changed, but there was kind of a firewall between the two. I went and met. I went down to Blizzard and met some of the people, but like all of the other Activision studios, Infinity Ward, Sledge, Treyarch, Toys for Bob, we all were encouraged to like mingle, talk, give talks at GDC for one another, all this stuff. But Blizzard was kind of isolated. I think probably from the Blizzard management sort of did that. I'm guessing, and there were 12 or so studios under the Activision banner. So if Activision is the publisher, then Infinity Ward and Treyarch and all these other
Yep.
companies are the various studios under. How what compare that to your time there, MechWarrior 2? Was it how many studios were under? Was it
It
was it
was it
not
was
even that way at
about
all
to
yet?
go out of business. When I
Yeah,
was there, we were working on. We had a small team on return. They were internal, right? They were an internal studio, so they were doing stuff themselves. And back before that, like when it was Activision back in the 2600 days, they were a third party developer for those carts. And I think Bobby and Howard had just purchased them like a couple of years before, and because they were in the World Savings Building at in West LA, kind of like San Vicente and Wilshire in that area. If you know where that area is, a big black bank building there. They were like
yeah.
It said World Savings. I love that about Activision, and it was a big black building. When
Yeah.
I went and interviewed there, I was like, "Wow, this is so cool." And we had two floors at the World Trade Center at the World Savings buildings, and that was all the business there. The business was all business and sales and everything was on one floor, and then the studio was on the 20th floor, I think, or something like that.
Okay.
And there was like Return to Zork was being worked on, a game called Paparazzi was being worked on, a game called Spycraft was being worked on, maybe Muppet Treasure Island. I think that was all the games, right? And MechWarrior 2, right? And
Yeah.
those games didn't do so well, but MechWarrior made enough where all of a sudden they became a player. Um, they started to grow like by by 2 or 3, like I started in 95, by like 97 or 98 they bought a building in Ocean Park and they moved Activision over to Ocean Park, and then
Hmm.
so they had a big building and they were a lot bigger then, and they started doing more publishing deals. So I remember they were working with id, um, like
Yep.
John Romero came by. Speaking of John Romero again, and when we were making Mercenaries, he came by and he played. He was touring Activision and he played Mercenaries, right? And he's like, "Hey, this is cool." And I remember they were there was, you know, talks of publishing, and there became like inside Activision an internal studio versus a publishing model, and it kind of, I mean, the internal studio left. Eventually, we all left, right? Because they went to just publishing. And I got to say, it's probably a good idea for what I'm seeing. So they're doing really great.
Yeah, yeah. So at that time there wasn't like subsidiary studios like there are now. It was just like
There might have been,
one
but I'm
company,
not
several
sure.
teams getting made.
Yeah, I don't think that. I think
Yeah.
that was all the games that were being made, basically, were those. And I don't. There might have been. I mean, they were doing deals. Bobby was doing other deals, so there might have been other things. So, if somebody calls me up and says, "No, we were doing this," I'll say, "Okay, well, I'm not going to say 100% it's all they were doing, but pretty sure it was a pretty limited, and it was." PC games were still good, probably for another 3 or 4 years, like till about '99, and then consoles completely took over and destroyed PC games. Right? PC games almost went away. Like you couldn't buy them. Like you used to go shopping and buy them in a store, right, like at Best Buy or something. And
Yeah.
one day they were moved over to where the educational software was, and there's like 3 games. It's like, what happened? And then all of a sudden you go to
Yeah.
GameStop or whatever, there's only console games, right? And that was it, for the next 10 or 15 years, that was it. But I prefer PC games. I'm glad that they've kind of come back and are kicking consoles' butts now. So I'm glad to see that.
Nice.
Um,
Yeah, I remember playing, and I may be getting Mech 2 or Mech 4 confused. I think it was Mech 2. I remember playing on my Sidewinder. I still have my Sidewinder joystick in a bin right over here that I played Mech 2 on way
I'm
back
surprised you
then.
didn't break it. And this thing's broke.
And
Yeah.
it's still
They,
like the
they, they, you,
connector
they were not
doesn't even work.
designed for mouse and keyboard. They were designed for a joystick. And if you
Oh
did
yeah.
not have a joystick, when we did Heavy Gear 2, we actually redesigned it so it worked with mouse and keyboard. So, it was
Okay.
more shooter like. Um, but I like those days where you had to have like foot pedals and
Yeah.
HOTAS and all that stuff. Those were cool
I
days.
just recently and conveniently, to play your game, I just got a new HOTAS when the Star Wars VR game came out. But I think it was like right when the pandemic hit and Flight Simulator was coming out, and so two big flight sim games
Mhm.
after a very long dry spell. So like you couldn't get them with the supply chain problems. Like they were just sold. There was like a 9 month backlog or something. So
For Flight Sim?
for like flight sticks.
Oh, the sticks. Oh, yeah. They
Yeah,
probably, because they don't make them anymore that much. I mean,
yeah,
Thrustmaster,
fewer. There's still Thrustmaster and Logitech,
yeah.
but I ordered mine, and yeah, it took 6 or 9 months to get it. And by the time I'm like, I already forgot. I was excited to play Star Wars Squadrons in
Yeah.
VR. I was stoked about
I
that.
wanted to like that, but that just was too arcadey for me. It just
Yeah.
didn't make it. Haven't tried Microsoft Flight Simulator. I need to try that one, but that one's too real for me. I like it somewhere
Yeah,
in between.
like some action in there. I am going to enjoy a drink myself,
Sure.
if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So let's introduce this little non-product plug product plug. My wife just got this. It's a Don Julio 1942 Rosasado. So it's like a pink reposado tequila.
Beautiful.
So let's give it a try. And while I'm pouring this, talk about so you worked, you interacted with Bobby Kotick. He's a fellow who's got a bit of a reputation in the industry. There's memes about him.
Oh yeah.
You see him pop up in the news from time to time. Give us a personal account. What was it like working with him back then?
Bobby was great. I liked him. We got along really well. I mean, I think I made him a lot of money, so he was happy with me. So I don't think I don't think I ever saw his bad side because I usually all my P&Ls were positive, were in the
Yeah,
black. Uh, and we interacted. He we definitely, when we started moving towards publishing, he brought like some people in that were not game people. They were business people. Like they had worked to, standard manufacturing and stuff like that. So
yeah,
it started. I believe that's when it started to probably step away from being a fun place to work. And I believe Bobby actually said we want to take the fun out of making video games or something like that. He made a quote
yeah.
like that, which like Bobby,
He's
what are you doing?
he's got
Uh,
some memorable quotes.
Yeah, but he was great to me. I liked him. He was always, I mean, the checks were good. So, they took care of me. They gave me what I needed to do my job. They gave me a lot of space. They didn't lean on me. Um, all the guys at Activision were great. I mean, and I find it surprising that there's all these sexual harassment things happening about now because as a director, I was trained all the time on, it was the first place I ever got like, uh, gender training and sexual harassment training and stuff like that. They made us go through everything. So I was surprised when some of those allegations popped up. I didn't think that was going to be happening at Activision. It seems like it happened more at Blizzard than Activision. Um, but I guess when some people have power, they take it to their heads. Like we were always really careful working with everybody and treated everybody kind, and Bobby was a big part of that because he wanted to make money, and if you're paying people for sexual harassment, you're not making money. You're paying people. You're paying lawyers to do stuff. So
Yeah,
I never saw that as something that he would do. But like I said, I liked him. I liked all the management at Activision. They were great people. We did a lot of E3s together. Um, and work together. And until my end day, I have positive experience about Activision. There's nothing wrong with it. It's good.
nice. Let's take a look at fast forwarding a bit. Some of the other stuff you worked on. You worked on some hit games from
Few.
Mech to Far Cry to Spyro to Crysis, several others. Talk about the Far Cry Crysis days. Where they were based out in Germany, right? How did you end up with those guys? Were you
I
out in Germany or
After I
no?
left Activision in '99, my partner that I was working with, the programming lead on Heavy Gear 2, Jean-Marc Morel, really really great friend of mine. He wanted his own company bad. I could care less about my. I didn't care. I was making games. I was happy. I liked working
Yeah.
for Activision. I didn't need my own company. But he talked me into joining a small company called Check Six. Check Six was a tech company, and they were in business with Maya, and they were taking Maya and they made a game engine out of it called the Maya Real Time SDK. So you could just make everything in Maya and export it to a game engine,
Oh,
and
I
it would
vaguely
run.
remember that from back in the day.
And it's what we made with Spyro. There was problems, and there's a lot of overhead with Maya, obviously, and games that are not cut, especially to do a job, doesn't necessarily work as good as one that's not. And at Check Six, we did that for a while, and John Mark and I both had a pretty good uh, backlog of games. So we got approached by 20th Century Fox. We met with the guy at 20th Century Fox ahead of it, and he said, let's get together, let's make a game. And he brought out like typewritten pages, like about 30 of them, and he put it on the table. He said, "What do you want to make?" And it was every license that 20th Century Fox had. He said, "What do you want to make?" And so we did, well, Planet of the Apes, that could be interesting, but we saw Alien and
Oh
Aliens, and I was like, oh, we got to make a sequel to Aliens because Alien 3 was not satisfying. So we need to make sure that we make the movie that James Cameron, the game that Cameron would have made after Aliens. So we came up with
yeah.
Aliens Colonial Marines and started working on that for console. So we were working on that for PlayStation 2. And right after that, Universal came and asked us to do Spyro, and we're like, "Geez, we taking two games? It's crazy." And we took it. We took it like idiots. So we were, pretty small company. We had to grow really fast. There were growing pains. We got Aliens Colonial Marines up to alpha, and that was right around the time the World Trade Centers went down. And so
Yeah.
everyone was all of a sudden not wanting to do violent games with shooting and stuff like that. So it got shaky, and then we had a bad alpha, so they canceled that. We didn't never get to finish it, but later on, other people made Aliens Colonial Marines, which was kind of funny. Um, I loved working on it. I did a lot of research on aliens, and a lot of the stuff that we put in the game, eventually that stuff kind of appeared, kind of similar stuff appeared in Prometheus, like the engineers,
Okay.
because we brought the engineer. We were like, what is a space jockey engineer, and how's that work, and how's what is the synth? All the robots like Bishop and Ash. What is this deal with them? So we had a lot of stuff with synths and Wayland Yutani and corporatocracy and stuff like that. And
Cool.
we were searching for the Sulaco, which was a ship that kind of just went away. It just disappeared, right? You don't, you it dropped off its compartment to Fury in Alien 3, and the three survivors there, but the ship itself disappeared, right? So we were like, okay, we're gonna go find the ship, and it had aliens on it. It was cool. I'm sorry it got killed, but we started working on Spyro. I was working on Aliens, so I didn't really work on Spyro, so I just helped produce it and produce the sound for it. But
Okay.
that was a tough gig because we were following Insomniac, and they really knew how to make Spyro really good.
Yeah.
And when we pitched them the game with the Maya Real-Time SDK, we wanted to do like a realistic looking Spyro, like, you know, grass looks like real grass, and his shell, his scales are iridescent and stuff like that. And that's the demo we showed them. And halfway through it, they said, "No, we want to go back to a cartoon shader," and we couldn't do a cartoon shader. We had to spend a month writing a cartoon
Oh no.
shader, and it killed us. It killed our polish time on the game. And the game sold well, but definitely when I tell people I worked on Enter the Dragonfly, they yell at me and tell me how bad I am. So I was
Oh
like,
no.
well, I just produced it. And then after that, I was like, as a company owner, you spend more time worrying about shares of stock and lawyers and stuff than actually making games, and I got sick of it. So I said, I just want to go get a job as a lead designer. So I don't even want to do any production anymore. I just want to do lead design. So I applied at Jean-Marc had heard Crytek had tried to recruit him because they'd heard about his programmer, but he told me about it. So I went and interviewed with Chevat and Ani and the guys, the Yearly brothers, and they hired me as they called it a producer of design, but my job was essentially the lead designer because I was in charge of the design team. I wrote the design documents
Okay.
and went on and we did Far Cry. And here's a nothing little company in Germany, Kolberg, Germany, actually, which is a tiny town of about 30,000 people, uh, you, about an hour's north of Nuremberg, um, and put out
Did you
Far
move
Cry.
out there?
Yeah, I moved out. I moved out to Kolberg, lived there for 3 years, and we finished Far Cry. And Far Cry was a huge hit for them. I mean,
Hell
we
yeah.
we we shipped in arguably the worst time you could ship a shooter because Doom 3 and Half-Life 2 were coming out, and we were shipping like the same month as them, but we sold comparable to them, which
You,
people were blown away by that because it was
yeah,
open
Far Cry
world
was a
and
hit.
yeah,
I remember my first time playing through, like all the jungle stuff was pretty revolutionary. Like, all the shooter games that time, buildings, walls, hard surface
looked
stuff
horrible.
was all anybody was doing,
Yeah.
because that's what the graphics cards could do and sort well at the time. But like, yeah, doing full on like foliage trees that you could shoot up, and I remember a lot of some of the tech that you guys had back then, imposters, where it would take I believe it was Far Cry. It might have been
That was
Crysis, but
Crysis. I think we
was
didn't.
it?
It was yeah. The everything was adamantium in Far Cry. You couldn't destroy it, right? Just it, and that's what sold me too. Was they showed me their Exile. They had a game called Exile Dinosaur Isle or something. It was an Nvidia demo, and they had the forest. And I said, I want to work on that because that looks hot.
Yeah.
And they did the forest right. And then when we were doing Crisis, we said, okay, we need to do even better. And like we ship Far Cry, and then a week later, Ubisoft buys the IP for Far Cry, right? So those guys, Chebot drives to work in $275,000 Mercedes, and I was like, wow, that's a nice car. Uh, and everybody was knocking on our door to do a game, and we chose EA, and he showed me a picture of a tropical island that was frosted over, and he said, make a game out of this. I want to call it Frozen Paradise. And I said, that sounds like a drink. We can't really call this game Frozen Paradise. It sounds like a drink. But then we pitched it. And it was basically Delta Force meets Aliens, and we wanted to do zero G gameplay in that. So maybe we made all this zero G stuff, and made an engine explicitly for that from scratch, right? And we sent a team to Tahiti for 2 weeks to document like they would tear plants apart, and they would go. They took like 10,000 pictures in Tahiti, and they brought it back, and we knew it was good when we could take a photograph and compare it to a screenshot, and you couldn't tell the difference. We knew we were in pretty good shape.
Hell
I
yeah.
think it still holds up today. And they got real mad at me because I said, look, I feel bad, but these tanks are rolling around and the trees are stopping it. We really need some breakable trees in there.
Yeah.
And they go to hell. You're not gonna have those. And
Oh
3 days
yeah.
later, the trees are breaking perfectly. So and then like, yeah, okay, that was really painful. But yeah,
I think that's one of the joys of game dev sometimes is it like I kind of picture movies. It's like you got a writer and a director, and it's their deal, and whatever they want is what happens. But in a game studio, like all the time, someone's just going like, "What if this crazy stupid thing happened?" And like nobody clears it with the producer. Nobody like someone just goes, "Yeah, that is cool. Let me go," and they just go put it in.
yeah.
Like I can't remember the number of times that I've seen that happen.
It's the beautiful part about this industry. I mean, it evolves, right? And every project you do it a little better, and then it kind of disseminates out to everybody else. And you're like, okay, we got to do it like that now. Like when you do something the first time, like when somebody did, iron sights on a weapon, everybody's looking at it and saying, damn, we all have to do iron sights now, right? And it's a thing,
Yep.
right? So it kind of, you get a little piece of it. Like I noticed my weapon customization from Crysis is in Battlefield 2042 now. I said, "Oh, look at that! It's almost the same graphics and everything." And like, it feels good, when you see it. But you don't get your name on it or anything. It's just out there, right?
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, and the Crisis engine lives on today. It got bought out by Amazon, I believe, and
They
if I'm
they bought a
correct,
license for it, made Lumberyard, but they're still working on the new Crysis engine. They're doing, from what I
okay.
know, they're doing Crysis 4 now, and they're hiring up for Crysis 4.
Whoa.
So
Okay. Cool. I
still going.
thought I thought the company went down. Am I wrong? Because
They were going down. There was a
right.
lot of trouble. They weren't getting paychecks, and
Yeah. Did they do Rise? I think that was an
they
Xbox
did. It's a
One.
good game. It just
I
didn't
love that
sell. It
game.
was a great game, beautiful, really stunning.
Fun as hell too. I loved the combat,
Yeah,
and yeah, I thought that was
needed
a
more
phenomenal
variety of
game.
enemies because it got a little old after playing it for a while. They needed more variety, and they needed a better uh, ramp of difficulty. It really wasn't there.
Yeah.
But a fucking awesome game. I had given Chebot, I'd shown him, I gave him the DVD from HBO's Rome, and I said, watch this. I don't know if it had anything to do with it, but I know I gave that to him about 3 years before.
Yeah.
So eventually, maybe he just said, I'm going to make a Rome game. So,
I was blown away by some of the GDC talks from Rise. Their effects team did some just bonkers stuff. It was
yeah.
one of the first examples of an alembic like in a video game. Alembic, if you don't know what that is, it's kind of it's essentially a file format, but it
hmm
lets you do simulation stuff in Maya or Houdini or whatever, and then like just plop it into a game engine with rigid body sim, fluid sim, cloth dynamics, all this stuff. So like the scene where it was one of their trailer moments where the boat is like crashing into the harbor and little catapult meteors are tearing the sails apart and ropes like man, I was blown away by that. I thought it
Yeah,
was so cool.
they would go meet with NVIDIA and ATI, and they would say, "What is every effect that your card can do?" And they would say, "We're going to do every like in Crysis, they say we're going to do every effect. What's soft particles, self shading, self illumination,
We're
bounce
doing it.
light, harmonics. They did it all. I mean, they put it all in there." And made it work. But then we got the meme, "Can it run Crisis?" Of course. So,
Yeah, I know that's one of its legacies. Can it run Crisis? That persists to this day. Like like that, and is it Quake or Doom where it's like they try to run it on everything, like fridges
like a
and all
phone,
kinds
like a
of
watch.
stuff. Yeah, that's great. Can you think of any Easter eggs that you've put into games that maybe aren't very public, or just funny, stupid moments in games? There's a lot of shenanigans that goes along on behind the
Yeah,
scenes.
well, my team definitely back in the mech days, my team always wanted to put Easter eggs in, right? So they do like a picture of
Yeah.
everybody with their heads cut off, or and you'd have to click at a certain head on a mech bay, and then 2 seconds later click on his arm, and really, really weird ways to do that. And then this thing would pop up, and you would see it. I mean, of course, Doom had all the cool Easter eggs where they put John Romero's head as the last thing you kill and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
we were inspired by that. Far Cry and Crisis, I don't think I let them do any Easter eggs in there. There was enough stuff that we were working on that we didn't really have time to put Easter eggs in there that I know of, right? They could have snuck them in. And in the black, I don't put any Easter eggs or cheats or anything. Because it's like I just wanted to have at least one game that's made just for the game's sake and not, no silliness and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
Right on. We're a little short on time. Let's just pivot to
sh-
let's just talk about design for a minute.
sure.
You've been a producer over your career. You've been a designer. Tell me, are there any like advancements in design lately that you're seeing, or on the horizon in the future? What excites you about game design these days?
Uh, I really immersion is my number one as a designer. That's what I want most of all is pure immersion. Anything that I mean, now that I teach at SCAD, we learn the terms for it, like magic circle and things like that, and we have all these academic terms for, the zone and you know digital dynamic difficulty adjustments and stuff like that. But the trend that I really like is the survival trend, where games are becoming really super hard unless you really spend a lot of time playing it, like games like Scum. To a lesser extent, Valheim, because they're a little softer with that stuff. But games like Scum, where it's like brutally hard, and you really feel every moment of it. So if you worked really hard and you got yourself a little gun and some guy kills you out of the blue, because the fear is there when you're playing, and to generate, to feel a way in a game that you lose time and you're transported to that other place. That to me is great. Um, I really was never a fan of the retro game situation of all these retro games that pop up. I wish those would just go away because I hate ugly graphics. I
Yeah.
got students making games that look like PlayStation 1. I say,
Pixel
"Why do you
art.
do that? Why would you do that?" But they want those constraints and I respect them for it. But I like it to look as realistic and awesome as possible, right? I mean, like we're in some ways we're going beyond realism now, in certain ways. The thing that I'm most excited about, what I want to put in a game, is I want to put Chat GPT as a character in a game. So when you talk to them, they talk to you back, and each one, like, can you get GPT to only play a certain character, like only speak like a caveman or only speak like an astronaut and answer everything. So you could sit there and have conversation with them that will last forever, right? So I definitely think that's coming, and that's going to be magical. Unreal 5 is just a great, beautiful, awesome engine. Uh, we're in the blacks made with Unreal 4. I wish we could jump to Unreal 5, but there's no way we would change the score. It's take another 10 years to get out. But
Yeah.
my students are using it, and just prototyping is amazingly fun, right? You throw something in there, and the lighting is so good in that engine,
Yeah.
and you're looking at it, you're going,
Killer.
God, I made this? Like, I made that? And you're looking at it, you can't believe it. It's just gorgeous. So, technology is going further. I'm loving that. The game design stuff like survival and anything to do with immersion mechanics and things like that. Certainly VR is exciting. I'm playing Demio on Quest 2 right now, and it blows me. I don't know if you've ever seen Demio.
I haven't yet.
Um,
No.
you're essentially looking down. Imagine if someone built a dungeon, um, in 3D, and you're a camera, go wherever you want to with it, and it's like a turn-based game like Dungeons and Dragons, where you move, you control one character and you move it, but you're moving the map around, you're going in and out, and you're moving stuff, and you're having these battles. But you can play with your friends, right? And they're sitting there, and they appear as a mask and hands, and you're playing with your
Okay.
friends at a tabletop game in VR, and it's awesome. I mean, so
Okay. Wow.
definitely the stuff in VR. Apple, the Vision Pro looks interesting, but it's nothing Quest 2 hasn't already been doing, and I'm sure Quest 3 is just going to be, amazing. So that's exciting to be able to see that stuff going on. I'd love to be able to play a real time strategy game, sitting in my living room, and the battlefield is all part of your living room and stuff like
Yeah.
that. It'd be great.
Thinking about horror and tension stuff. Don't Starve was a game that sucked me in so much. Oh my god,
Great game.
it was brutal as hell. Like you start the game, but that part of the fun of it too is like I'm playing through the old Ultima series again right
Yeah,
now.
I saw that.
Yeah, part of the fun is like not looking stuff up. It's like to me, it's kind of a bummer if like, all right, here's clue book. You're just like stepping through the
Yeah,
instructions of it.
video
Like,
walkthroughs, right?
yeah, so I try to do as much as I can without looking anything up, and that was part of the fun of Don't Starve. Was just like, you know nothing. There's no tutorial. There's no UI. Like okay, so you spawn. There's some bushes. You start picking them. It goes to night and a wolf eats you and you're dead. Like start over. He's like, oh fuck, okay, I need to deal with wolves, I guess. So you figure out, oh, I can make a torch, and it's just this constant cycle of like, get another 2 days, die. Like,
Yeah.
okay, what killed me? How do I get through it? That was a brilliant experience, I thought.
Yeah, a lot of my students are making rogue-like games now where they're procedurally
Yeah,
generated and brutally hard, and there's no progression. So you just play it, and you have to figure out how it works just by playing it, which it's interesting. Um, I'm getting it. I'm liking like Hades as a roguelike game, but I had some of my students made a game this quarter called Beneath the Badlands, and it was like that. And I didn't really understand it when they were first designing it about how it worked, but now I'm kind of getting a vibe on what's interesting about that sort of situation.
yeah. And I remember playing not a rogue like. I remember playing Rogue
Rogue.
on my 386 in high school with just ASCII art. And
Yeah.
like it was a crazy addictive, like fun game. I played the shit out of that.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah. I used to
Um,
play the gold box, D&D gold box games, the Champions of
oh yeah,
Krynn and the Pools of Radiance. Those are fun today, right? Yeah,
this
there
one.
it is. There it is. Those are
Yeah,
fun today. I mean, those are so awesome. I love those games, man. I used to play them just all night. I played that. I played UFO. What was it? XCOM. UFO Defense was like just amazing. Syndicate. I don't know if you remember the old Syndicate game. And there were
yeah,
some privateer. There were some great games back there, back in the day for sure. For sure.
yeah. I just fired up. I'm going on a bit of a retro kick because, and so Dungeons and Dragons as a topic. I'm hosting a retro campaign right now through the original edition. Um, and on the side, I'm also trying to collect and play through the Dungeons and Dragons games. So I recently bought an Intellivision, a C64.
That's a bad one.
Um, yeah, my Intellivision doesn't work. I got to repair it so I can play the second D&D game. Uh, and yeah, it's been fun to dig in that. And we've played Dungeons and Dragons together. I've been in your 1E game. You've played here with me and some
Yeah.
5E stuff.
Yeah.
Your
That was last
preferences
summer. We
towards
had a good
1E.
first edition game. That was good. You had a great character.
Yeah.
Uh, Yeah, D&D is still fun. Certainly, if you're a game designer, you need to be playing D&D. You need to be a dungeon master, and you'll get all the skills you need to do, other than coding to be a good game designer, certainly.
Yeah, interestingly, I found it goes both directions too. I recently wrote a one shot from a friend, and I was having a little bit of writer's block, and I'm like, well, let's just, like, how do we, like, let me just do it like sort of the Infinity Ward way. So, the kind of silly way to make sort of the game to come up with ideas and put them together was we just had three cork boards, one for gear, one for locations, and one for like stuff that happens. So gear would be a tank drone thing with a gun on it. Locations would be like the favelas of Brazil and the gulag in Russia and whatever. And then events would be like your snowmobiling down a mountain or stuff like that. So I'm like, all right, let me just try that to write a D&D campaign. So I came up with like, what is all of this just cool visuals and I'm like, all right, what if one of those flying citadels, you got to see the birth of it, where it like tore out of the mountainside. And then what if there's like a river like chase where draconians are flying down onto your boat, and just kind of like cool visuals, and then
Awesome.
and then I just strung it together into some narrative thread, and it was great.
I totally respect your D&D foo, man. You definitely got it going on. So you're definitely a lover. You're definitely a lover of all things D&D, and you've taught me some things about it that I didn't know. I mean, you and I played chainmail together, and I'd never touched that. And thanks to you, I got a chance to play that. So that was
Yeah,
great.
I'm prepping another army for a mounted match. It's been taking a while, but Jack, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's great
It's
talking
been
to
a real
you.
pleasure to have you. This has been Architects of Imagination. I want to thank our executive producer, Martika Ibarra, and our editor, Robert Burnett, and the whole Architects of Imagination team. Tune in next time. Thanks for joining us, y'all.
Thanks.